Welcome to Jason Talks on YouTube, politics and social issues discussion channel. You can support the channel by joining in the discussion below. Please subscribe, and if you're feeling particularly generous, you can also support me through Patreon. Thank you very much. Hi, Swedish elections, and of course thanks to Brexit I'm able to vote now in the Swedish elections. There's a couple of issues around the Swedish elections this time, this year, which are perhaps interesting internationally, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to cover a couple of those things in later videos, but I want to talk today about Swedish politics a little bit, because it's kind of interesting in terms of what's happened over the last 10-12 years or so, which is the rise of right-wing politics, which has been seen throughout Europe, whether that's in the UK, whether that's Marine Le Pen in France and other countries, Austria, Italy, Germany. We've seen right-wing groups rise in popularity throughout Europe, and that's been no different here in Sweden. In Sweden, the party which is is crystallised around this party, Sverigedemokraterna, or the Sweden Democrats, SD for short. The SD have their roots in the white supremacist movement in the 1980s. And the founding members of SD, or some of them shall I say, not all, but some of the founding members of SD had direct links with the neo-Nazi movement in Sweden. Since the early 2000s, they have worked to try and clean up their image and try to become an acceptable part of Swedish political life. That's been their aim. And in 2010, they passed the 5% threshold. Was it 4% threshold? Can't quite remember. But they passed that threshold, and they got enough votes to get representation in the parliament. That was 2010. Since 2010, SD have successively increased their vote share to the point where they've been threatening to become the second biggest party in Sweden. They got marginally just fewer votes than the moderates, and the moderates are kind of like the Swedish version of the Tory party. Not quite as bad as that, I would say, but that's a comparison. And SD have their vote share came just under the moderates. And the interesting thing in Sweden is how the other political parties have decided to respond to this growth of this right-wing party. And the initial response was to ignore them. We're going to ignore SD, we're not going to talk to them, they're not invited. We know that they exist, but we're going to do everything we can to not include them in any kind of decision-making capacity, as much as we possibly can. And that's been the tactic for most of the parties for most of the time, up until last year, when the leader of the moderates, Ulf Kristersson, decided to open up to working together with SD. and this has changed a little bit of the political landscape in Sweden. Kind of changed things a little bit. You almost have like two blocks. You've got like a centre to the right where you have the Liberals, you've got the moderates, you've got Christian Democrats, and you've got SD. On the other side you've got the Social Democrats, you've got the left, you've got the Green Party or the Miljöpartiet, and you have the Centre Party. The Centre Party, by the way, used to be more the centre-right. They've kind of moved over. And they moved over in order to keep SD out of power. That's basically their reasoning for that. But now, with Ulf Kristersson working with SD, the question is that tactic going to help bring in enough votes in order to put him in power? What would happen actually if SD got more votes than the moderates? So that's a bit risky. On the other hand, will there be a reaction against that, and so more votes go over to the Social Democrats and the Centre Party and that side, in which case the Social Democrats will remain in power. It looks like that the Social Democrats are marginal favourites to win the election and to remain in power. We shall see. I can't call it. I don't know which way it's going to go, but it's an interesting dynamic. And just the tactics which are deployed in dealing with the SD, I think are a little bit controversial. After all, a lot of people voted for them. Should they just be ignored in the way that they have been ignored? On the other hand, are they a serious party, or are they feeding off the dissatisfaction of the people? And I think that is a problem. And it reminds me of two things. I mentioned before in a previous video, Stephen Fry, that the rise of the right, in this case SD, is to do with the catastrophic failing of the left. And that seems to be a little bit of the case here in Sweden. It also reminds me of an interview I heard during an election campaign. I can't remember if it was the last election or the election before. There was an interview from a truck driver in Dalarna, which is an area of Sweden. And he was worried about his future as a truck driver because he felt that he just couldn't compete with the Finnish truck drivers who are coming over from Finland. So contracts were being given to Finnish truck companies, and people like him were just not able to compete. And he took this issue and spoke to this issue with representatives from the Social Democrats, some from the moderates, and he felt he got shrugged off, wasn't listened to. It was a non-issue. He kind of felt that the main political parties didn't even seem to care about this particular issue. So when he goes to talk to the Sweden Democrats, Sverigedemokraterna, they sat down and listened, and they agreed with him and appeared to take him seriously. Now, I'm pretty sure that there's no policy has come from, not pretty sure, I know that no policy at all has come from SD to deal with that particular issue. There hasn't been one. However, he was listened to. And this, I think, is really the catastrophic failure of the left. It is the failure to take seriously the issues that affect people's daily lives. I spoke in a previous video about issues around identity politics and stuff like that, and that there's a focus on other things, but not a focus on the real things that matter, the real issues that matter in people's working lives. And the left has almost, there's a feeling amongst a large section of society that the left has forgotten the working person and has stopped listening. So perhaps that is where the catastrophic failure of the left lies. That's where it is. Concerned with its own issues, but not listening to the issues which matter to people. So, what's going to happen? Have the other parties learnt to listen, or will SD continue to rise with its vote share? We shall see. Not sure yet who I'm going to vote for, but I think you can probably guess that you know who I'm not going to vote for. See you again. Thank you very much for watching Jason Talks on YouTube. Please remember you can support me through joining in with the discussion below. Please subscribe, and also if you're feeling particularly generous you can support me through Patreon. See you again.